Welcome, dear listeners, to the Carolina Haints podcast, brought to you by Recabot Productions and A Darker World. I'm your host, Dan Sellers. Every fall, Halloween rolls around. And as it does, it turns millions of otherwise loving children into raging psychopaths, jacked up on a candy-fueled sugar high. They take up arms and butcher scores of innocent pumpkins. They slash, they slice, they scoop out the insides with a spoon. And then they threaten to do the same to you, unless we pay their price. More candy. Okay, maybe it isn't exactly like that. Nonetheless, every year millions of pumpkins are carved out of the enjoyment of children of all ages. Some are carved with scary faces, some with funny faces, and some of them are worked into scenes of pure artwork. We put lights inside to bring out every detail of the intricate carvings, or maybe just to make a scary carving all the more creepy. But throughout much of North Carolina history, the jack-o'-lanterns didn't need the help of a candle to frighten and terrorize the masses. In the late 18th century, they were considered evil, unholy things. The coastal residents of North Carolina often reported seeing bizarre lights out in the swamps. They called these horrifying balls of light jack-o'-lanterns, or old jacks. Of course, today you are probably thinking the same thing I am: swamp gas, a phosphorescent chemical reaction created by rising methane. But perhaps not all of them were so easily explained. The legend tells of a man named Jack from Bear Creek. Bear Creek is a tributary of the Neuse River, marking the border between Wayne and Greene counties. Somehow, Jack managed to get into an argument with the devil. As you can imagine, that's never a good idea. Finally, the devil turned Jack into a frightening, glowing demon, forced to float around the North Carolina countryside. Old Jack was said to trick and deceive. They say he could cast a spell on the unwary, making them follow him off the paths and deep into the swamps until they were lost forever. Other stories say that he could bewilder even the most experienced hunters, fooling them into shooting their own horses. Before long, colonial North Carolinians began to fear Old Jack nearly as much as they feared the devil himself. James Creech never forgot his run-ins with the sinister Bear Creek jack-o'-lanterns back in the 30s. It was a hot, sticky July night, and James, still a teenager, went out to the creek for some night fishing. The sky was cloudy, so he brought a kerosene lamp to light his way. His usual fishing buddy had to work early the next day, so James headed off alone. A couple of hours went by without a single bite, and James decided to call it a night. Suddenly, he saw a light in the distance. Thinking that his friend had changed his mind, James quickly packed up and hurried toward the light. He followed the lights for nearly a half mile along the bank of Bear Creek, closing the distance, but never catching up to his friend. He realized that the light was moving slowly away from him, so he yelled for his friend to wait on him. Instead, the light floated across the creek and rose up into the trees, where it finally disappeared. "Oh, Jack," James thought, as he ran all the way home. If you look up haunted attractions on the internet, Spookywoods in High Point will consistently be near the top of most lists. But what few people know is that this landmark is reportedly actually haunted. One employee tells the story of a farming family that owned the property in the early 1930s. This was during the Great Depression, and things were tough for the family. They decided to take in a boarder to help with their expenses. Now I'm sure they had the same concerns that you and I would have. How do I know what sort of person I'm allowing around my family? As it turns out, their fears were unfounded. The older gentleman that showed up to their doorstep quickly became part of the family. The children grew especially fond of the man, and in the evenings, the man would entertain the family with his fiddle. Over the next few months, however, it became increasingly obvious that there was something wrong with the man's health. He was diagnosed with heart disease. One of the symptoms was drastic weight change, either rapid weight loss or sudden weight gain. Unfortunately, in this case, it was the latter. Within weeks, the man was forced to take all his meals in the bedroom because he was physically too large to fit down the narrow staircase. During the day, they would hear the man's shuffling footsteps as he paced back and forth in his room, unable to do anything else. And in the evening, he still played the fiddle for the children whenever he felt up to it. One day, one of the children took the man's meal up to him. The child returned and told his mother that the man wouldn't wake up. The mother went upstairs, and as she had feared, the man had suffered a massive heart attack and passed away. The children were heartbroken. Not long after the man's death, the family began to hear strange sounds in the house. They could hear footsteps walking around upstairs. Heavy shuffling footsteps, just like the man during the last few weeks of his life. Then, one evening, the family was sitting around the fireplace after supper, and they heard a soft, rhythmic sound. At first, they looked around at one another to verify that they had actually heard a sound. What is that? Is that something outside? The father and his oldest son got up to look outside, grabbing the shotgun along the way. Then, as they passed the upstairs staircase, they realized the noise was coming from inside the house. It was music, fiddle music, coming from upstairs. They even recognized the song as one that the man would play for them. The father and his son rushed upstairs, but of course, no one was there. They opened the room that the man had rented from them, and there, sitting on the bed, was the man's fiddle, right where they had left it days before. At first, the family was frightened by the sounds, but as they continued to occur, the family grew accustomed to them. They felt honored that the man had chosen to continue to play for them, even though he had passed. They had considered him part of the family, and now they knew that he felt the same about them. Occasionally, a visitor would hear the music, and the family would say, "Oh, that's just the fiddler playing us a tune." Before long, the property gained a reputation as being haunted. 50 years later, the new owners of the property decided to cash in on the house's reputation, and cash in they did. Spookywoods has been open for more than 30 years, and every October, it plays host to over 40,000 guests and employs over 300 people. Several years ago, the Winston-Salem Paranormal Society visited the property. The workers told them stories of hearing footsteps in the upstairs part of the house where no one else was around. And they also reported being physically touched by an unseen presence. The paranormal investigators witnessed several peculiar events. One of them was scratched, and another had their hair pulled. Two of the investigators were in the upstairs hall when a tube of horror makeup flew out of an unoccupied bedroom. They also recorded some EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, that said, "Get out," and "Fuck you," and "Leave me alone." Then came the final EVP, singing, along with the faint sounds of a piano, although there is no piano in the house. Since all the stories of the fiddler portray him as kind and gentle, they theorized that perhaps there was more than one presence trapped on the property. But there could be another answer. Perhaps the spirit doesn't like what the property has been turned into. Maybe the musician is defending the memory of the family that took him in when he had nowhere else to go. Or there's the possibility that Spookywoods' current phantom has nothing to do with the fiddler at all. The employees say that the strange events are not isolated to the house. They claim that they have seen things that they cannot explain all around the property. Dark figures have been seen in the woods. Some are adult-sized, peering out from behind the trees. Others are small, like children, darting across the path you're on. But regardless of their size, anytime someone tries to follow them, they quickly vanish. Odd glowing balls of light are also seen on the property, especially around the dark dungeon that marks the entrance to the haunted trail. The lights bob and weave themselves through the trees before disappearing into thin air. One woman claimed that shortly after she started working there, another employee was showing her around the property when they heard whistling from behind them. They turned to see who it was, but no one was there. Thinking that perhaps it was a bird or even their imagination, they continued on the path. As soon as they turned their backs, the whistling started again. It followed them around the property, fading away every time they stopped to look for its source. So the next time you visit Spookywoods, pay close attention. Some of the things that try to scare you might actually be supernatural. To learn more about Old Jack, check out Daniel Barefoot's North Carolina Haunted 100 Volume 1, Seaside Specters. And to learn more about Spookywoods, check out Michael Reniger's Ghost of the Triad, Tales from the Heart of the Piedmont. This episode was researched and written by Jeff Cochran and is narrated and produced by me, Dan Sellers. If you enjoyed the show, please feel free to check out all our other projects. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Wreak Havoc Productions, and I'm on Twitter at Hank vs. the Undead. You can find every episode of our show and everything else that we're up to at our website, wreakhavocproductions.com. Don't forget to check out darkerworld.com for updates on Jeff Cochran's work, and feel free to email us with your suggestions or queries at wreakhavocproductions@gmail.com. Please go to iTunes and give us a review. Anything helps. We'll be back in a few weeks with another episode. Tune in then to hear more about the things that go bump in the night.